The verdict of arrogance. The crystalline walls of the judgment chamber on Station Omega-7 reflected the light of 1,000 stars, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled crowd. Lieutenant Sarah Blackwood stood in the center of the containment field, her posture straight despite 3 weeks of confinement. Her dark skin gleamed under the harsh examination lights, and her brown eyes surveyed the alien tribunal with a soldier's assessment of terrain. The chamber held representatives from 47 species, each convinced of their superiority over the newcomer race that had only achieved faster-than-light travel a mere century ago. Humans, the word itself had become synonymous with recklessness in certain circles of the Galactic Confederacy. High Arbiter Zelak presided over the proceedings, his serpentine form coiled on the elevated platform. His species, the Cytherians, had administered galactic law for 3 millennia. His scales shifted from silver to gold as he prepared to speak, a sign of judicial authority among his kind. Around him sat the other judges, the crystalline Vormak whose body chimed with each movement, the gaseous nebula entity that swirled in its containment sphere, and the ancient Threk whose bark-like skin had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Lieutenant Sarah Blackwood of the Terran Defense Forces. Zelak's voice resonated through the chamber, translated instantly by the neural networks embedded in every attendee's communication implant. You stand accused of the destruction of the Korthax Memorial Archive on Sentinel Moon 4. This archive contained the last remaining records of a species extinct for 10,000 years. Your actions have erased irreplaceable knowledge from our galaxy. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. Her defense attorney, a young Alterian named Vilex, had already presented her case. The archive's destruction had been unintentional, a result of her ship's emergency landing after being attacked by pirates. The tribunal had dismissed the pirate attack as irrelevant. Rules had been broken. Heritage had been lost. The evidence is indisputable, continued the Vormak judge, each word accompanied by crystalline notes. Your ship's black box confirms contact with the archive structure. Molecular analysis shows human contamination throughout the ruins. You have cost the galaxy a treasure beyond measure. The crowd murmured their agreement. Many species present had never forgiven humanity for their rapid expansion into space, their tendency to colonize worlds others deemed too dangerous, their inexplicable ability to thrive where others merely survived. This trial was as much about putting humanity in its place as it was about justice. Zelak raised himself higher, his form towering above the assembly. The tribunal has deliberated. We have reached a unanimous decision. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant hum of the station's life support systems seemed to pause. Lieutenant Sarah Blackwood, you are sentenced to permanent exile on Zerion Prime. Gasps erupted from the gallery. Even those who despised humans looked shocked. Zerion Prime was legendary, a planet so hostile that automated probes rarely lasted more than hours on its surface. It was a world of constant volcanic activity, atmosphere thick with sulfur and methane, populated by creatures that defied conventional biology. The planet had claimed the lives of every expedition sent to study it. You will be provided with standard exile provisions, Zelak continued, his satisfaction evident in the golden shimmer of his scales. Basic clothing, no technology beyond a tracking beacon, no weapons. Transport will commence immediately. May the galaxy learn from your fate. Vilex's feathers turned a deep purple, a sign of extreme distress. High Arbiter, this is execution, not exile. I must formally protest. Your protest is noted and dismissed, Zelak interrupted. The sentence is final. Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. I have a question. The tribunal exchanged glances, surprised by her composure. Most condemned beings were sobbing or raging by now. Zelak inclined his head slightly. Speak. May I see the planetary data for Zerion Prime? Atmospheric composition, gravity, temperature ranges, local fauna classifications? The request was so unusual that Zelak actually paused. The Threk judge rustled his branches in what might have been amusement. Why would you want such information? It will only confirm your doom, Sarah shrugged. Call it professional curiosity. I was a xenogeology specialist before joining the Defense Forces. I'd like to know what I'm walking into. After a moment of consultation, the tribunal approved the request. A holographic display materialized before Sarah, showing detailed scans of Zerion Prime. She studied it intently, her fingers twitching as if taking notes. The atmospheric readings showed 18% oxygen, 45% nitrogen, 30% carbon dioxide, with traces of sulfur compounds. Gravity was 1.3 times Earth standard. Temperature ranged from 40 degrees to 55 degrees C, depending on proximity to volcanic activity. The fauna files showed creatures with redundant organs, natural armor plating, and various deadly adaptations. Something unexpected happened. Sarah smiled. Not a resigned smile of someone accepting their fate, but the genuine expression of someone who had just received interesting news. "Thank you," she said. "This is very helpful." The tribunal exchanged uncertain glances. Zelak's scales flickered between gold and silver, betraying his confusion. "You understand this is a Class 12 Deathworld? No known sapient species can survive there." Sarah's smile widened slightly. "Hi, Arbiter. Are you familiar with Earth's planetary classification?" The question seemed to irritate Zelak. "Earth is a Class 8 Deathworld. We are aware of your species' unusual origin. It changes nothing." "Class 8.7 actually," Sarah corrected. "Reclassified last year after the Gornoth expedition finally completed their survey. They were particularly impressed by Australia." The nebula entity pulsed with curiosity. "What relevance does this have?" Sarah gestured to the Xerion Prime data still floating before her. "The gravity is only slightly higher than what I trained in during military service. The temperature is comparable to Death Valley in summer, where humans regularly conduct endurance races for entertainment. The oxygen level is actually higher than what I experienced during high-altitude training in Tibet. As for the sulfur compounds, they're unpleasant but not immediately fatal to human biology." The chamber had gone completely silent. Several species were frantically checking their datapads, comparing Earth's statistics with Xerion Prime's. The similarities were unsettling. The creatures, though, Vilek said hopefully, his feathers shifting to a lighter purple. "Surely the predators look dangerous, yes," Sarah agreed. "But I noticed none of them use projectile venom, which is common in Earth's tropical regions. No mention of neurotoxins either. The largest predator listed is about the size of an Earth polar bear. Impressive, but not unprecedented." Zelak's coils tightened, a sign of agitation. "You speak as if you expect to survive." Sarah met his gaze directly. "Hi, Arbiter. My species evolved on a planet where the rain can strip flesh, where tiny insects carry diseases that have killed millions, where the ground itself can open and swallow entire cities. We have hurricanes that can level continents, temperatures that range from 89 degrees to 56 degrees C, and predators that hunt in coordinated packs using complex strategies. We didn't just survive there. We thrived. We became the apex predators." She paused, letting her words sink in. "So yes, I expect to survive. Xerion Prime seems challenging, but hardly impossible." The Threk judge leaned forward, his ancient voice carrying surprising strength. "You cannot be serious. Every expedition to Xerion Prime has ended in death." "Every non-human expedition," Sarah corrected. "My species has never attempted it." "Perhaps it's time we did." The crowd erupted in discussion. Some accused her of bravado. Others wondered if humans were truly as adaptable as they claimed. The tribunal looked distinctly uncomfortable. They had intended to make an example of human recklessness. Instead, they might have just given humanity a chance to prove their superiority. Zelak struck his ceremonial gavel, restoring order. "The sentence stands. You will be transported to Xerion Prime immediately." His scales had turned a dull bronze, indicating deep uncertainty. "We shall monitor your progress." As the containment field deactivated and guards moved to escort her, Sarah called out one final time. "Hi, Arbiter. When I establish my settlement, I'll be sure to name it after you. Camp Zelak has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" The guards led her away, leaving behind a tribunal that suddenly wondered if they had just made a terrible miscalculation. They had wanted to humble humanity, to demonstrate the consequences of defying galactic law. Instead, they might have just given humanity the perfect stage to display exactly why Earth was classified as a death world, and why its children were something the galaxy had never encountered before. Sapient apex predators who thrived on challenge. When predators become prey, the descent through Xerion Prime's atmosphere was violent enough to concern even the experienced pilot of the transport vessel. The ship bucked and rolled through thermal columns rising from the planet's volcanic surface, while electrical storms sparked across the hull. Lieutenant Sarah Blackwood stood calmly in the deployment bay, using the turbulence to test her balance, treating it like a training exercise. The Cytherian guard watched her through the reinforced transparency of the control room, his scales shifting to a nervous yellow. He had transported hundreds of prisoners to exile worlds, but never had one seemed so composed. She was actually doing stretches, preparing her muscles for planetary gravity. "Deployment in 60 seconds, he announced through the intercom. "May the void have mercy on you." Sarah nodded, still stretching. "Understood. Quick question. Any particular predator season I should know about? Mating season? Migration patterns?" The guard's scales rippled in confusion. The tribunal provided no such data. "Why would it matter? You will not survive long enough to observe patterns." "Just being thorough," Sarah replied, rolling her shoulders. "My survival instructor always said the first hour on a new world determines the first week, and the first week determines the first month." "You speak as if you plan to last months." Sarah grinned. "I'm thinking years, actually, but let's start with months." The deployment door opened with a hiss, revealing Xerion Prime in all its hostile glory. The landscape was a patchwork of blackened rock and sulfurous pools, with twisted vegetation that seemed more mineral than plant. In the distance, a volcano painted the purple sky with streams of lava. The air shimmered with heat, and even from inside the ship, the smell of sulfur was overwhelming. "Deployment now," the guard announced. Sarah stepped forward without hesitation, dropping the 3 meters to the ground with practiced ease. She landed in a crouch, immediately scanning her surroundings. The transport's engines roared as it lifted off, leaving her alone on the surface of what the galaxy considered certain death. The tracking beacon on her wrist activated, beginning its eternal broadcast of her location. Somewhere, she knew, hundreds of observation drones were focusing on her, broadcasting her expected demise to viewing screens across the galaxy. The tribunal would be watching, waiting for her to collapse, to panic, to die. Instead, Sarah took a deep breath, analyzing the air. The sulfur content made her eyes water initially, but her body was already beginning to adapt. The higher oxygen content actually made her feel slightly energized once she adjusted to the smell. The gravity was noticeable but manageable. She'd trained in worse. First priority, water. The briefing had mentioned volcanic activity, which meant possible hot springs. Where there were hot springs, there might be mineral pools cooled enough to provide water. She began walking, her pace measured to conserve energy while covering ground. Within an hour, she had located a series of stepped pools where volcanic runoff had created natural terraces. The upper pools were boiling, but as the water cascaded down, it cooled. She found one pool that was merely warm, the water cloudy with minerals but likely safe enough after filtration. She fashioned a basic filter using her shirt, layering it with sand and crushed volcanic rock. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. As she worked, she became aware of being watched. Not by the drones, those she had spotted immediately hovering at what they considered a safe distance. Something else was observing her from the twisted vegetation. The creature emerged slowly, clearly not used to being detected. It was roughly the size of a large dog, with 6 legs and scales that shifted color to match its surroundings. Its head was elongated, filled with rows of teeth designed for tearing. By the standards of the galaxy, it was a nightmare. By Earth standards, it was a monitor lizard with extra legs. Sarah remained still, not out of fear but from tactical assessment. The creature was likely an ambush predator, relying on camouflage and surprise. Its muscles were built for short bursts of speed, not prolonged chases. She slowly picked up a piece of volcanic rock, testing its weight. The creature hissed, a sound probably meant to paralyze prey with fear. Sarah hissed back, louder and more aggressively. The creature actually took a step backward, confused. Prey didn't usually respond with their own threat displays. When it lunged, Sarah was ready. She sidestepped, using its momentum against it, and brought the rock down hard on the back of its skull. The creature collapsed, twitching once before going still. First kill within 2 hours of landing. The watching galaxy was stunned. Sarah didn't waste the opportunity. Using sharp volcanic glass, she skinned the creature with the efficiency of someone who had cleaned game before. The meat would provide protein, the hide could be useful for protection, and the bones would make tools. She even extracted the venom sacs from its jaw, careful not to rupture them. Venom could be useful for hunting or defense. By nightfall, she had established a basic camp in a cave system she'd discovered in the volcanic rock. The caves were formed by ancient lava tubes, providing natural insulation from the surface temperature. She had a fire going. Child's play for someone who had learned to make fire in Earth's rainforests where everything was damp. The smoke from the sulfurous wood was acrid, but it would keep smaller predators away. She cooked the meat from her kill, noting that it tasted somewhat like alligator. High in protein, low in fat. She'd need to hunt regularly to maintain caloric intake, but that was manageable. As she ate, she planned. The next days followed a pattern that would have seemed impossible to the watching tribunal. Sarah didn't just survive. She thrived. She mapped the local area, identifying water sources, game trails, and defensible positions. She learned the patterns of the local predators, quickly establishing herself as something to be avoided rather than hunted. One predator, a massive beast with armor plating and tusks, made the mistake of considering her prey. It charged her near a cliff face, exactly where she had led it. At the last moment she dodged, and its momentum carried it over the edge. The fall didn't kill it. The creature was too tough for that, but it broke several of its legs. Sarah ended its suffering quickly and efficiently, then spent 3 days processing the carcass. The armor plates became shields and tools. The tusks became spears. The tendons became rope. By the end of the first week, she had a fortified shelter, multiple weapons, a steady water supply, and enough preserved meat to last a month. The observation drones recorded everything, broadcasting her methodical conquest of the environment to an increasingly disturbed galaxy. The tribunal reconvened in emergency session, watching the feeds from Zirion Prime. Sarah had not only survived but was teaching improvised classes to the drones, explaining her techniques as if conducting a survival course. Today we're going to discuss the importance of establishing territory. Her voice came through the feed, clear despite the atmospheric interference. Most predators are territorial. Once you establish yourself as the apex predator in an area, others will generally avoid confrontation. It's simple economics. Fighting takes energy, and energy is survival. She had just finished constructing what could only be described as a home, not a shelter, not a temporary camp, but an actual dwelling with separate rooms carved into the rock, a ventilation system to manage the sulfur fumes, and even decorative elements made from colorful volcanic glass. High Arbiter Zelak watched in horrified fascination as Sarah planted what appeared to be a garden. She had identified several of the twisted local plants as edible after careful testing, and was now cultivating them. "This cannot be possible," he muttered, his scales a chaotic swirl of colors. The Threk judge rustled his branches thoughtfully. "We have misjudged them. Humans don't just come from a death world. They've mastered it, and now we've given them another one to master." 3 weeks into her exile, Sarah did something that broke the tribunal completely. She spoke directly to one of the observation drones, knowing her message would be broadcast across the galaxy. "To the esteemed tribunal and anyone else watching," she began, her face sun-darkened but healthy, her eyes bright with triumph. "I want to thank you for this opportunity. Zirion Prime is challenging, yes, but it's also beautiful in its own harsh way. The volcanic activity creates the most spectacular sunsets. The mineral pools have therapeutic properties that help with muscle aches. And the local fruit, once you neutralize the acidic coating, is actually quite refreshing." She paused, adding with a slight smile, "I've been thinking. Once my exile is over, oh wait, it's permanent, isn't it? Well, in that case, I'll need to start planning for long-term development. I'm thinking of setting up a proper homestead, maybe establishing some trade once other humans inevitably arrive to join me. After all, if one human can thrive here, imagine what a colony could do." The transmission ended with Sarah returning to her work, humming an earth tune as she reinforced her walls against the planet's more aggressive fauna. The message was clear. Not only had the tribunal failed to execute her, they had given humanity a foothold on one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds. Within days, the first human ships began requesting permission to establish a research station in Zirion Prime's orbit. For scientific purposes, they claimed. The tribunal couldn't refuse. It would be admitting that their death sentence had become an invitation. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Humans didn't just survive death worlds. They conquered them, transformed them, made them home. And in trying to humble humanity, the tribunal had instead announced to every species in the galaxy that humans were exactly what they had claimed to be, the children of a death world. Apex predators with intelligence and perhaps the most adaptable species the galaxy had ever encountered. Sarah Blackwood's exile had become humanity's greatest advertisement. And somewhere in the crystalline halls of Station Omega 7, High Arbiter Zelek's scales remained a permanent shade of mortified bronze, knowing that there was indeed a Camp Zelak on Zerion Prime, and it was thriving.